The Galactic Council's emergency session had been called for the third time this cycle, and Ambassador HFY was growing increasingly frustrated. The holographic displays showed the same troubling data, livestock disappearing across 17 systems, mysterious energy signatures detected near agricultural colonies, and reports of shadowy creatures that vanished the moment security forces arrived. "The Kethmori predators have escaped containment," announced Admiral Vorthak, his crystalline carapace clicking with agitation. "Their homeworld was destroyed in the supernova event 6 months ago. We thought the species extinct, but these incidents suggest otherwise." Dr. Liza Chen sat quietly in the human delegation section, her fingers drumming against the polished table. As the only xenobiologist specializing in apex predators, she'd been studying the Kethmori for years through archived data. What the Council didn't understand was that these weren't random attacks. They were the desperate actions of survivors. "We must organize hunting parties," declared Senator Yilneth from the Proxian Empire. "These creatures pose a threat to civilian populations across multiple sectors." "They're not creatures," Liza finally spoke up, her voice carrying across the chamber despite its quiet tone. "They're sapient beings, and if my analysis is correct, they're cubs." The chamber erupted in confused chatter. Ambassador HFY raised his forearms for silence. "Explain yourself, human Chen." Liza stood, activating her personal holo display. The projection showed anatomical comparisons and behavioral pattern analyses. Adult Kethmori were 12 feet tall, apex hunters with sophisticated pack strategies. These incidents show smaller entities, roughly 4 to 5 feet in height, with erratic hunting patterns consistent with juvenile behavior. "They're not attacking, they're scavenging because they don't know how to hunt properly yet." "Juvenile or not," Admiral Vorthak interjected, "they remain dangerous. The Kethmori were classified as Class A predators for good reason." "Which is exactly why we need to handle this correctly," Liza said firmly. "Send hunting parties after them and you'll trigger their predator instincts. They'll become the monsters you think they already are." James Rodriguez, her research partner and the human delegation's military liaison, leaned forward from his seat. "What are you suggesting, Liza?" She took a deep breath, knowing her next words would shock the assembly. "Let me make contact. Alone." The chamber exploded in protests, but Liza continued speaking over the noise. "I've studied their behavioral patterns for years. Kethmori cubs imprint on caregiver figures during their formative period. If they've been without adult guidance since the supernova, they're operating on instinct and desperation, but they can still be reasoned with." "Absolutely not," Senator Yilneth declared. "We will not sacrifice a council representative to these beasts." "I'm not asking for permission," Liza replied calmly. "I'm informing you of my intention. Under Article 47 of the Xenological Research Accords, I have the right to attempt peaceful first contact with any species exhibiting sapient characteristics." Ambassador HFY's mandibles clicked thoughtfully. "And if you're wrong? If they kill you?" Liza met his compound eyes steadily. "Then you'll have confirmation that diplomatic solutions won't work, and you can proceed with your hunting parties with a clear conscience." 3 days later, Liza stood alone in the cargo bay of a modified shuttle, orbiting the agricultural moon of Kepler 442c. James monitored her from the cockpit, his hands hovering over the emergency extraction controls. They'd tracked the energy, signatures to a series of abandoned mining tunnels beneath the colony's main settlement. "Last chance to reconsider," James said through the comm. "I can have a security team here in 20 minutes. And if they sense armed forces approaching, we'll never get another opportunity like this," Liza replied, checking her environmental suit one final time. "Besides, I made them a promise." "What promise?" "You never mentioned." "I promised them, 3 days ago, when I sent out the wideband transmission in their language. I told them their people weren't forgotten, that someone would come who understood their loss." James stared at her through the cockpit window. "You've been in communication with them for 3 days and didn't tell the council?" "The council wanted to hunt them down like animals," Liza said, her voice hardening. "These cubs lost everything. Their world, their families, their entire species' knowledge base. They're alone in a universe that sees them as monsters. Someone had to show them that not everyone had given up on them. She activated the shuttle's landing sequence. I'm going down. The mining tunnels were darker than her suit's lights could fully penetrate, but Liza moved forward with steady confidence. She'd memorized the tunnel layouts and knew roughly where the cubs had established their den. What surprised her was how quickly they revealed themselves. 3 shapes emerged from the shadows, sleek predatory forms with intelligent amber eyes that reflected her suit's lights. They were indeed juveniles, barely reaching her shoulder height, but their natural weapons were still impressive. Razor-sharp claws, powerful jaws, and the distinctive crest of spines that marked them as Kethmori royalty. I am Liza, she said in their language, the guttural sounds awkward through her suit's translator. I came as promised. The largest of the 3 cubs tilted its head, and when it spoke, its voice carried the melodic undertones that indicated high intelligence. You speak the old words. How do you know the song of our people? I studied your people's culture. I know of the great hunt, the bonding circles, the promise of the stars. Liza slowly removed her helmet, showing her face despite the risk. I know you are the last cubs of the royal den. The cubs exchanged glances, and the smallest one stepped forward. The burning sky took everything. We escaped in a cargo pod, but we know nothing of hunting, nothing of the ways. We take food where we find it because we starve otherwise. I know, Liza said gently. And I know you're afraid. Kethmori do not fear, the largest cub said, but its voice wavered. Cubs can fear, Liza corrected. Adults of your species were fearless because they had learned wisdom. You haven't had the chance to learn yet. She knelt down, bringing herself to their eye level. I cannot replace what you've lost, but I can offer you something your people would have wanted you to have, a choice. What choice? Asked the middle cub. You can continue as you are, becoming the monsters the galaxy expects you to be, or you can let me teach you another way. Not the way of your people, that knowledge died with them, but a new way, where strength serves a greater purpose. The cubs were silent for a long moment. Finally, the smallest spoke. What would you teach us? Liza smiled. How to be predators who protect instead of prey upon. How to use your gifts to serve life rather than destroy it. How to become legends that would make your ancestors proud. And in return? In return, you help me prove to the galaxy that some promises are worth keeping, no matter how impossible they seem. The largest cub stepped forward and, in a gesture that made Liza's heart race with both fear and hope, gently touched its clawed hand to her outstretched palm. We accept your promise, Liza of the humans. Teach us this new way. As James later reported to the council, Dr. Chen had indeed made contact with the Kethmori cubs. What he didn't report, what none of them ever officially reported, was the true nature of the promise she'd made. The cubs became her protégés, and eventually the galaxy's first Kethmori peacekeepers. Some promises, Liza often reflected, were too important to explain to those who wouldn't understand. Some bonds transcended species, politics, and fear itself. The predator cubs had found their pack leader at last,